Karen Lancaster was screaming about community aesthetics like she was on fire and the barn was the match. Her platinum perm bounced with each stomp as she waved a forged eviction notice like it was the Constitution. Behind her, a bulldozer chewed through my great-granddaddy's barn like it owed the HOA money. Deputies cuffed me on my own land while Karen shouted about visionary dog parks over the engine roar. That morning, I was just planting squash. By sundown, we were at war. They brought bulldozers and fake smiles and thought I'd just stand there. Bless their hearts. I was elbow deep in compost and goat drama when the call came through. My wife Jolene never calls unless it's an emergency or there's a snake in the kitchen. This time it was both. They're tearing down the barn, she screamed. I could hear the engine roars through the phone. With bulldozers, Clay. There's cops here. They say it's for a community project. My brain short-circuited. What barn? I asked, like an idiot. Your grandfather's barn, Clayton. That's all it took. Jumped into my F-150 like a man possessed, boots muddy, shirt unbuttoned, hair looking like I'd fought a leaf blower, and lost. The road home was a blur of gravel, profanity, and the occasional squirrel that will probably need therapy. When I skidded into the driveway, I thought I'd landed in a disaster movie directed by someone who really hated old buildings. Dust clouds hung over the east field. My family's 100-year-old barn, the one built with rough-cut timber and great-granddaddy's bare hands, was now a pile of splinters and heartbreak. One bulldozer was still chewing through the foundation like it had a vendetta against heritage architecture. And standing in front of the mess, looking like she'd just declared war on nostalgia, was none other than her, HOA president, Karen Lancaster, queen of passive aggression and platinum highlights, flanked by her beige-clad board members and, oh, look, Deputy Earl, her brother-in-law, in full uniform and holding a clipboard like it was a sword of justice. This is private property, I roared, storming toward the scene. Earl stepped in front of me like he thought he was the final boss in a video game. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. I am calm, I growled. This is me calm. You want to see not calm? Karen sauntered over, smiled tighter than a Tupperware lid. Mr. McGraw, this structure was declared a safety hazard. We've repurposed the space for a community dog park. It's a win for everyone. A win for who? I snapped. The raccoons that lived in the hayloft? You were sent notices, she added, waving a cream-colored envelope like it proved she was God. To what address? I demanded. She blinked. Box 93A. I live at 471 Old Mill Road. Always have. Box 93A is an abandoned post office locker 2 towns over. So either Karen's mailing system is run by a drunk pigeon or this was a setup. Earl took that moment to reach for his cuffs. Sir, you're interfering with a county-approved improvement. Oh, I'm interfering? On my own land? Click, cold metal snapped around my wrists. Jolene screamed. A crowd had gathered. Neighbors, dog walkers, a kid eating popcorn like it was reality TV. A few people clapped. Others looked horrified. No one stopped it. As Earl pushed me toward his cruiser, I caught one last glimpse of the wreckage. Dust settled over shattered beams. My son's initials, carved into the barn door just last year, lay buried under tire tracks and bureaucratic arrogance. They thought this was over. That one fake letter in a Caterpillar 320 could erase 5 generations of calluses, sweat, and stubbornness. But they didn't just crush a barn. They cracked open a war. When Clayton was 12, his grandfather took him down to the pump house after a drought so mean it made the dust taste like betrayal. The old man didn't say much, just handed him a rolled-up scroll of parchment and said, "This ain't just paper, Clay. It's armor." At the time, Clayton thought he meant it figuratively. Turns out it was legally bulletproof. Back in 1911, during a record-breaking drought that turned cattle into statues and rivers into rumors, Earl McGraw, Clayton's grandfather, had done what most men were too scared or too broke to do. He took every cent from that year's harvest, marched into the county clerk's office, and registered the McGraw Water Covenant. It was more than a water rights agreement. It was a private utility contract granting the McGraw farm full control over the aquifer that ran under the valley, including the system of irrigation channels Earl helped dig by hand. But the real genius was buried 3 clauses deep under language so dry even the lawyers had to drink coffee twice just to stay awake reading it. Clause 9. In the event of destruction or trespass upon protected agricultural structures by any party without written consent, said covenant holder reserves full authority to terminate all downstream access without notice or legal mediation. In being signed in fountain pen and blood, figuratively, although legend had it, Earl pricked his thumb on the seal just to make a point. Clayton hadn't thought about that covenant in years. Not until the lawyer, a retired estate specialist named Linda Vaughn, who looked like she ate HOA letters for breakfast, flipped through the dusty binder and whispered, "Oh, my Lord, you got 'em by the spigots." Because all that lush green turf the HOA bragged about in their flyers, the fountains with mood lighting, the luxury homes with 10-step spa showers, they were fed by McGraw water quietly, legally, and completely dependent. The HOA had struck a handshake deal with the county 20 years ago to tap into the McGraw system instead of installing their own. It saved them millions, and it made them vulnerable. They weren't just standing on stolen land, Linda muttered. They were drinking stolen water. And now that barn, his grandfather's barn, was gone, leveled, flattened like a lie under cross-examination. They didn't just remove a structure. They activated the clause, and with it, Clayton's legal right to twist the valve and let them learn just how expensive arrogance could get. He didn't speak when he left Linda's office, just packed up the old binder, nodded once, and walked out into the heat, like a man with a sermon and a shotgun. That evening, as the sun burned low and the shadows stretched long over cracked earth and ruined beams, Clayton stood in front of the old pump house. The rusted handle of the main valve glinted like a warning. His hand hovered for a moment, steady as stone. He remembered his grandfather's voice, soft and slow. "Water remembers, so do we." Then he reached for the wheel. And what came next? Oh, they weren't ready. They called it Whitmore Meadows Dog Sanctuary, a name so fancy it practically wore pearls. Karen Brockton arrived in a pastel power suit, holding giant scissors like she was cutting the ribbon to Heaven's Gate. Local press showed up, a drone buzzed overhead, and someone handed out custom doggy cupcakes, all on land that still technically belonged to Clayton McGraw. That part left off the press release. "Today is about community," Karen declared, flashing her signature pageant smile. "And tail wags." She posed in front of the newly installed Whitmore Park sign, complete with marble base and solar-powered uplighting, as if it weren't sitting on the grave of a 100-year-old barn. Meanwhile, the residents, still high on HOA Kool-Aid, clapped and sipped flavored water in branded tumblers. But cracks were already forming beneath the manicured sod. A few eagle-eyed homeowners noticed something strange. The park blueprints and HOA files didn't match what was being built. Where there was supposed to be a picnic pavilion, concrete palings were going in. Where the dog agility ramp stood, utility flags were marked in developer orange. Then came the leaked email thread. A concerned board member, one who apparently didn't appreciate being played, forwarded internal messages to a local resident who ran the neighborhood Facebook group. In the screenshots, Karen and a certain Mr. Langford, CEO of Horizon Developments, discussed Phase 2 verticals and maximizing ROI post-community integration. Translation? Condos. Luxury ones. Right on top of the park. That's when the mood shifted. First came the questions at HOA meetings, then the rumors, then the retaliation. One family, the Nayans, got slapped with a $500 0-cent sound disturbance penalty after singing karaoke in their own backyard at 9:03 p.m. Coincidentally, they were among the first to publicly oppose the park plans. Karen claimed she was merely upholding community harmony, but residents weren't buying it, especially not after another neighbor got fined for non-compliant patio furniture. And just when things couldn't get any pettier, the water started acting funny. Faucets coughed. Sprinklers sputtered. Ice makers made dry coughs instead of cubes. An HOA notice went out. Routine maintenance, expect temporary pressure drops. But temporary turned into hours, then days. And still, Karen smiled, waved, and posted photos of herself playing fetch with her dog near the fake fountain. Until one morning, every mailbox in Whitmore Estates had a hand-delivered letter sealed with a gold McGraw Ranch emblem. No return address, just bold print, notice of termination, water access ease. The letter explained, clearly, legally, and with just enough snark, that due to the unauthorized demolition of agricultural property in violation of standing easement terms, all residential water access via McGraw irrigation lines would cease unless full restitution and land restoration occurred within 15 days. 15. Karen laughed literally on camera. Mr. McGraw is bluffing, she said to Channel 6 News. Can't possibly affect municipal services. He's just a farmer. Clay didn't respond. He didn't have to. Because what Karen failed to realize was simple. The pipes didn't run through city infrastructure. They ran through history. And that history had valves. She thought he was bluffing. She was about to meet the drought. By 8:00 a.m., the park was a Pinterest dream come to life. Balloons tied to every fence post, cupcakes and compostable wrappers, and Karen posing beneath a handmade banner that read, Whitmore Dog Park, where community grows. Never mind the fact that it was growing on stolen soil. She wore a powder blue pantsuit that screamed, Middle management at war with leisure, complete with matching pumps and a clipboard holstered like a weapon. Families trickled in, all smiles and wagging tails. The ribbon cutting was set for 9 o'clock. By 8:45, the selfie sticks were up. The news intern from Channel 6 was rolling B-roll, and Karen was flanked by her HOA minions like she was about to announce a moon landing. I watched from the old truck parked just outside the chain link gate, sipping coffee like it was popcorn. Then came 9:07. A golden retriever pawed at the shiny new hydration station near the park entrance. Its owner hit the button. Nothing. She hit it again. Still nothing. That's weird, she said. Karen walked over, confident as ever, and pressed the button herself. Dead silence. Not a drip. Not even a hiss. A mutt lapped at an empty bowl while a poodle barked in confusion. The Doberman sniffed around the sprinkler system. Still bone dry. 10 minutes later, Facebook exploded. Why is my water off? We just installed this thing and it doesn't even work. Can't shower. HOA better fix this. By noon, the whole subdivision knew something was wrong. Toilets weren't flushing. Ice makers were spitting air. Karen, of course, blamed the aging municipal infrastructure, which would have been a compelling argument if anyone in Whitmore Estates had ever been on a municipal water line. They weren't. They were on mine. Meanwhile, someone caught video of Karen's prized Chihuahua, Truffles, fainting dramatically on the AstroTurf while she shrieked, "Get it bottled Evian, now!" The video went viral within the hour under the caption, "Chihuahua goes down with the system." Even the news intern shared it with a crying, laughing emoji. Emergency HOA meeting? Called. Emergency HOA solutions? None. Karen dialed the county water department. The county water department dialed their lawyer. And me, I dialed nothing. I just sat on my porch and turned the page of an old paperback while a dozen Range Rovers crawled around the neighborhood like confused Roombas. Martha brought me lemonade. Duke, our old hound, snoozed in the shade like he hadn't just helped cut off water to 200 luxury homes. Technically, he hadn't. I had. Legally. Thoroughly. And after multiple ignored notices, generously, at 4:00 p.m., I got a knock. It wasn't angry. It was tired. A dad with 2 kids in tow, sweat beading on his temple. "We're just trying to wash up after baseball, sir. What's going on?" I offered him a chair. Told him the short version. His eyes widened as I showed him the deed, the water maps, the footage of the bulldozers flattening our barn. He left shaking his head. But not at me, because somewhere between a thirsty golden retriever and a viral fainting chihuahua, the narrative was changing, and fast. They thought I was bluffing. They were about to meet the drought, and tomorrow was going to be much, much drier. By the time day 3 of the water shutdown rolled around, Karen was no longer sipping cucumber water on her deck. She was in the phone with every lawyer in the greater Tri-County area, trying to spin the situation from, oops, we bulldoze a historical structure, to we're the real victims of a rural terrorist. And by Friday morning, she made it official. Karen Whitmore, HOA president and patron saint of perfectly edged sidewalks, was suing me for extortion, emotional damage, and my personal favorite, unlawful monopolization of water rights in a community setting. The courthouse was packed tighter than a state fair fried butter stand. Reporters in press khakis, HOA board members fidgeting in pearls and pastels, and half the neighborhood pretending they just happened to be in the area. I walked in wearing boots still crusted with the same dirt Karen had tried to erase, and a shirt that had survived 3 droughts and 1 unfortunate tractor accident. My lawyer, Bill Nobia, Durham, carried a banker's box full of documents older than Karen's last real emotion. Her attorney, a man with slick back hair, loafers that cost more than my roof, and a voice that sounded like it had passed through 3 layers of PR, opened with a speech about civic harmony, abuse of power, and how one individual cannot hold an entire modern community hostage for personal vendetta. Bill stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "Your Honor, she brought receipts. We brought blueprints, originals, signed in ink and blood." The courtroom went still. We rolled out the Granger Water Covenant of 1911, complete with my grandfather's signature, water right, notary stamps, and a clause in fine print that basically said, if our land is ever seized or destroyed by force, we can pull the plug. Literally. Karen scoffed, "These documents are outdated. We're a modern HOA." Bill smiled. "The aquifer says otherwise." Then came the kicker. We wheeled in a TV, played the security camera footage from the day they flattened my barn like it owed them child support. There she was, powder blue blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that signature smirk, leaning into the bulldozer operator and saying, "Clear as crystal, take that ugly barn down. I want lake views for the condos." You could have heard a pin drop or a tiny HOA heartbreaking. Karen turned pale. Her lawyer started sweating. One juror covered her mouth like she'd just watched a puppy get kicked. Bill leaned toward the bench. "Your Honor, we have documented proof of fraud, forged seizure notices, destruction of protected property, and admitted intent to develop private condominiums under the false guise of a public park. Not to mention, my client holds unilateral water control under a pre-regulatory covenant signed by the state." The judge didn't speak for a moment, just stared at the yellowed paper in front of him, then looked up at Karen, then at me. "This," he said slowly, "isn't just property. This is legacy." And with that, Karen's case didn't just start falling apart, it started evaporating. Next up, time to make it official, because this courtroom wasn't just about water. It was about washing the HOA off the map. By day 5 of the water shutoff, Meadowcrest Estates didn't smell like luxury anymore. It smelled like panic, sunscreen, and unwashed labradoodles. Karen tried to spin the story, of course, blamed a technical malfunction in the system, waved around vague memos from the county, and even had the audacity to suggest it was due to climate irregular heart. But folks weren't buying it anymore. The sprinklers weren't sprinkling, their hot tubs were turning into algae jacuzzis, and the HOA group chat had gone from pastel cupcake photos to full-blown digital mutiny. One guy wrote, "If Karen says one more time this is a temporary disruption, I'm moving into the barn rubble with Clayton." Meanwhile, the media vultures had officially landed. Local Channel 6 ran a headline, "Dog Park Drought, HOA Faces Legal Firestorm from Farmer with Water Power." But it was Independent Weekly that dropped the real bombshell. Their investigative piece revealed that Karen's husband, Gregory Whitmore, country club real estate investor and occasional flamingo shorts enthusiast, had received $50,000 in stock options from Skyline Development just 3 days before the barn demolition. That wasn't just shady. That was sunscreen in your eyes while driving shady. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, it wasn't a meeting. It was a public trial held in folding chairs and lawn rage. The gymnasium was packed. Residents stood shoulder to shoulder, many still in flip-flops and sun visors, clutching empty water bottles like protest banners. Karen stood at the front, makeup flawless, smile forced, gripping a clipboard like it could still save her. "I understand everyone's concerns," she started, voice tight, "but these accusations are completely unfounded, and then why did your husband get paid off the week you bulldozed our water supply?" a woman in the back shouted. Karen blinked. "That was unrelated. He has investments. "You destroyed a family farm," another yelled. "You said it was a dog park. Now I hear it's phase one of a condo resort." Karen's facade cracked right at the jawline. This is all hearsay. And a teenage boy held up his phone. "This you, Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked before playing the infamous bulldozer video. "Take that ugly barn down. I want lake views for the condos." The room erupted. Karen looked like someone had just played her funeral slideshow in advance. And then from the back someone stood, boots caked in red clay, faded overalls stained with soil and honesty, a straw hat in one hand, a manila folder in the other. It was Clayton McGraw. The room went silent. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "I didn't come here for revenge," he said, voice steady like a tractor idling at dawn. "I came because what was mine got stolen. Not just land, not just a barn, but trust. You were sold a lie, and when you turned on the faucet and nothing came out, that wasn't karma, that was consequence." Karen stared daggers, but they bounced off like mosquitoes on a windshield. He continued, "My grandfather built that water system for this land, not for politics, not for profit, for life. And when someone tried to tear it down for lake views and lobby lunches, well, I made sure the land remembered." There was a pause, then applause. Slow, then loud. A few folks even stood. Clayton didn't smile, just tipped his hat and stepped back because the war wasn't over. But tonight, the tide had turned. When the judge finally ruled, it felt less like a verdict and more like a thunderclap that echoed from the courthouse to the crumbling edge of Meadowcrest Estates. The ruling was scathing. The HOA had acted outside their jurisdiction, forged legal documents, violated water rights, and caused intentional destruction of private property. Cynthia Karen Whitmore was ordered to step down immediately, pay full restitution, and this would make Clayton's boots tap the floor, issue a formal apology in writing, signed and notarized. It was poetic justice with an ink stamp. Claire didn't show up for the ruling. Of course she didn't. Rumor had it she was holed up in her wine cellar polishing off the last of her HOA-branded Chardonnay, but the fallout came fast. Within 72 hours, her nameplate was gone from the HOA office, replaced by a sticky note that simply read, "Ask Jim." The HOA board dissolved like sugar and rain, and in their place, a community with rolled-up sleeves and calloused hands ready to fix what they had once let be destroyed. The barn rebuild started on a Monday. No ribbon cutting, no speeches. Just Clayton in a flannel shirt, one hand on a shovel, and the other resting on the original blueprints, unrolled on the tailgate of his truck, and weighed down with river stones. The McGraw barn had been a local landmark since 1887, and the goal wasn't to modernize it. The goal was to bring it back exactly as it was, maybe even stronger. Neighbors showed up with saws, hammers, and casseroles. A retired architect donated his time to oversee reconstruction. Kids painted wooden signs that said things like, "No condos here," and "Save the seeds." The town's blacksmith, yes, they still had one. Hand-forged new hinges for the barn doors using reclaimed steel from a wrecked HOA gate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They used hand-hewn timber from a nearby mill and brought in red clay bricks that matched the original foundation. The stone base, cracked and mossy from decades of storms, was rebuilt one rock at a time. Every screw, every nail was placed with care, like they were writing an apology letter to history. And every lunch break was a chance for someone to tell a story about what the barn meant. Apple festivals, first dates, the time someone's goat got stuck in the hay chute. By week 4, the frame stood tall again, weathered wood gleaming in the sun like it had waited patiently to be remembered. Clayton stepped back, wiped the sweat from his brow, and screwed in the final piece. The new old sign, carved by hand with the same typeface his grandfather once used for cattle tags. McGraw Heritage Farm, S-still standing. They didn't just rebuild a barn. They reclaimed something no bulldozer could touch. And just when Clayton thought the saga was finally over, he found a small package sitting on the steps of the pump house. No name, just a red ribbon and an envelope. Inside, the original singed nameplate of the barn. Rescued from the rubble and scrubbed clean. Alongside it, a note on thick paper, penned in handwriting that didn't dare use loops or hearts. you win. But damn, you made me respect it. Okay, Clayton stared at the note for a long time. No grin, no gloat, just a small nod. Because sometimes respect doesn't come from winning a war. It comes from reminding folks why the fight mattered in the first place. And the next part, well, that wasn't a battle. That was the beginning of something better. 12 months after the dust settled and the last bulldozer was escorted off McGraw land like a drunk uncle from Thanksgiving dinner, the place looked nothing like a battleground. It looked alive. The kind of alive that doesn't come from glossy development plans or HOA newsletters. It came from sweat, soil, and second chances. The McGraw barn, rebuilt with hands and heart, had become more than just a barn. It was now the hub of the entire community. Every Friday, people showed up with lawn chairs, empty baskets, and stories to swap. Farm to Table Fridays wasn't just a catchy slogan anymore. It was a ritual. Kids picked cherry tomatoes straight from the vine. Seniors swapped pickling recipes. And somewhere between the hay bales and the folding tables, neighbors became a neighborhood again. The dog park? Yeah, about that. After Karen stepped down and quietly sold her house to a jazz musician with 3 goats and no tolerance for HOA politics, the place got a makeover. The AstroTurf was ripped up. Out went the decorative dog fountains and the overpriced poop bag dispensers. In came rows of sweet corn, rainbow chard, and a coop of rescue hens named after pop divas, Beyond Cluck, Lady Egga, and Aretha Feather. Local school kids came every Wednesday to feed them, and you learned that eggs don't come from cardboard cartons. And Clayton, the man who once stood in handcuffs watching his barn fall, now stood behind a podium, this time voluntarily, addressing the State Agriculture Board. A local legislator had heard about the saga, read the newspaper feature, watched the viral dog video, and reached out with a simple question. Would you mind telling your story at the Capitol? Clayton had laughed at first, then said, only if I can wear my boots and don't have to lie. He gave a speech that day, half history lesson, half sermon, all truth. And when he finished, the room stood up like the floor was on fire. Weeks later, the McGraw Act passed with bipartisan support, strengthening landowner protection against unauthorized HOA expansion and adding a clause preserving agricultural easements from corporate abuse. Back home, the changes were quieter, but just as profound. The McGraws hosted canning workshops in the fall, compost clinics in the spring, and a storytelling night once a month in the barn loft under string lights and the scent of fresh-baked zucchini bread. Nobody got fined for their fence color. Nobody measured lawn heights with a ruler. And the only thing that needed HOA approval anymore was whether the music was too loud for the chickens. One afternoon in late summer, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and turned the fields gold, Clayton hammered in a new wooden sign at the front gate. He'd carved it himself, rough, a little crooked, and perfect. It read, "Welcome to McGraw Acres. No dues, no drama, just dirt, roots, and real things." He stepped back, hands dusty, boots scuffed, and smiled, because at the end of the day, they thought progress meant condos, contracts, and committees. Clayton McGraw? He knew better. Progress means knowing your neighbor's name and sharing your tomatoes. Some battles aren't fought with fists, they're fought with deeds, blueprints, and a stubborn love for what actually matters. This story isn't just about a barn or some HOA run amok with clipboards and delusions of grandeur. It's about standing your ground, literally. When someone tries to pave over your history in the name of progress, Clayton didn't win because he yelled louder. He won because he remembered who he was, where he came from, and refused to let legacy be bulldozed by paperwork. In a world obsessed with speed, polish, and fake perfection, sometimes the real revolution is growing food, knowing your neighbors, and saying no with a smile. So, what would you fight for if they came for your roots? Drop your thoughts below, share this story if it hit home, and hey, don't forget to subscribe for more tales where the underdog kicks back. Welcome to the side with dirt under our nails.